So I'm going to be just quickly going through my new sample pack, Essentials Vol.1, which is out now. Very quickly run down the samples that are included down the side. I'm not going to go through every single one, obviously, because that's going to bore the hell out of everybody. But I'm just going to show you a little bit about what's included. Then I'm going to go through the project, which is the demo track, and just explain a couple of little bits in there, and then do exactly the same in the FL version. And then that's going to be it. So bear with me. Okay, so what I wanted to do with the sample pack was kind of play on areas where I think that that might come into most use for people. Obviously, like a lot of sample packs have tons of percussion and snares and things like that. So I wanted to make the pack kind of tailored more towards like the UK hardcore hard dance crowd. So the two areas where I feel have kind of got the best are probably the bass sounds and then the kicks. So I'll run through the bass sounds first of all. There's loads of sort of standalone bass sounds there. Donks. Loops, and there's also one-shot versions of those as well that will key labeled, as you can see, right from the lower C to the higher C. So there's 13 notes to choose from. There's some psytrance and hard side bits, as well as on top of that, you've also got 6 UK happy hardcore bass packs, and those include loops on every key. Each pack slightly different. Then you've got the single one shots as well. So yeah, that's the bass in essence. I'm not going to go through all of them, obviously. I've got some samples from my tunes. You may not know any of my music, but if you do, then you might recognize some of those track names there. So there's bits in that, and then I've left a few aside for like future sample packs as well. The other bit I was talking about was the kicks, which I think are really good. They're ones I made in Kick 2. They're also key labeled as well, which I think is really important now. And I just wanted to give like a kind of bit of a modern touch to some of the kits, some of the kicks, like a modern punch. Particularly like kick 1, 2, there you go. And there's a couple in there from some of my latest tunes as well. There's also some Midi kits. There's 6 in total. No, there's not. There's 5 in total. They consist of like bass chords, support chords, top lines in each one. So if you're stuck for ideas, you could just chuck them onto some preset sounds to get some things going. There's also some one-shot vocals.
Hey! Bass! 3, 2, 1.
Oh, cringy, that's my own voice. And then there's the demo track, which is what you can hear here. So yeah, onto the demo track. It's basically split into 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The demo track's basically split into 6 kind of little mini demo tracks, each consisting of, what I've done for each one is they're all in their folder. So you've got vocals, bass, claps, snares, percussion, kicks, etc. And I just wanted to run through, like, yeah, I'm not going to play them, but I just wanted to sort of show you really. The dry samples are here, and if you want the wet sounds, they are included under Songstarters and Synth loops. But yeah, so the dry versions are here, and then the bounce versions of what's included in the pack. Also, so each one is slightly different. There's quite a few melodics. You've got MIDI. One of them's made out of MIDI Pack 5. The other one's made of MIDI Pack 2. Then you've got the side drops. And also triplet side drops. The donk drop. And then finally MIDI Pack 1. So I've made use of those with as many samples as I could. Yeah, just chucked in. So there's like, obviously that's not the best one, the effects, but on the synth loops, for instance, there's processing on all of the sounds. So you can see how I go about doing my processing. There's also some sends as well for reverb and delay, as well as a mastering chain. So there's loads of stuff for you guys to get into there to have a look at, as well as the samples that are all listed down the left-hand side. Okay, into the FL project. So this is the FL demo project. It's exactly the same layout. You've got the 6 different mini demo tracks included. There's a slight variation. So that I think the side drops are like 8 bars shorter. But the same principle applies. I've put in the relevant processing needed on each sound so that you can see how I go about doing my processing. Things like delay, reverb, EQ, compression, mainly are the kind of key ones there. As well as things like saturation on my drums and percussion. On top of that, there's also a little mastering chain as well. The difference, yeah, there's not really much difference between the two. Obviously, FL Studio and Ableton are 2 completely different programs, so the way I've had to go about the layout and some of the processing slightly different because the stock plugins are different essentially. So I can't get the exact same sound. So this doesn't sound exactly like the demo track, but you've got all the samples included, and as with the Ableton one, the dry versions are here included in the project, and the wet versions will be in the sample pack. So that is a very quick overview of my brand new sample pack, Hard Essentials Volume 1. Okay, so there's a couple of things that I want to go through in terms of Mixdown tips. I'm not going to go mad in depth on stuff, but there's just a few little tips I want to sort of go through, which some of you guys might know. They might sound really obvious. Some of you may not know. So, take it or leave it, I guess. The first one, which is to me one of the most important things, given that sort of the music I produce is kick drum led, hardcore, UK hardcore, happy hardcore, hard dance orientated, is the side chaining to the kick so that the kick can breathe in the mix. The main example of that is, I guess, bass lines quite often you hear are side chained, and they pump under the kick drum. Like the dubcore era is probably the best example of that. However, lots of sounds can be side chained to the kick, and the main thing in a lot of tracks that I get sent that I hear is that the lead sometimes sits on top of the kick rather than ducks with it. So I want to just go through the side chaining I've applied to the synth loops here in the demo track. So what I've done is I've side chained this lead here. That one's already side chained, as you can see it ducks on the audio, but I wanted to side chain the top line, and I've done that via this kick trigger here, which is a blank MIDI. There's just 4 MIDI notes, and that is going to a send channel, so it's not playing at all. There's it's one of my top kicks is the audio, which won't play obviously because it's on the send, and then that then is routed to a compression here, which I've routed via that bit there, audio from. So if you open up that on the normal compressor, it brings up the side chain section. These kind of need to be tweaked to get it right, but if I play it without first and then with, you'll see the effect that the side chain trigger has on the lead. And I'll turn it on. And I can do it more aggressively. Obviously, that's how the way it's opened is the way I've got it in the template for you guys, and that's how I think it sounded best. But I'll show you a more aggressive version of that. So yeah, that's one thing which I think is really important is to make sure the kick side chain to it. I mean, it's common in a lot of genres, electro, for example, progressive house, the bass lines and the leads quite often side chain to the kick, so the attack of the kick can breathe and makes the kick drum sound more punchy. Your mix is slightly louder because you're creating the space in the mix. I also find that doing the same thing on percussion has a similar effect. This one is, I guess it's not much there anyway, but on things like my rides, closed hats, I tend to just bring the volume automation across ever so slightly. Again, that just allows it to breathe slightly there. Not all sounds need it. Obviously, you want some sounds to kind of hit on the kick drum, like a clap or a closed hat. But yeah, I felt like with this particular sound, the ride cymbal sounded slightly better, just slightly off of the kick drum. So I've also done the same thing throughout the demo track on various different sounds. Demo track, MIDI pack 2, same. There we go. I've done pretty much the same. It's exactly the same settings as well, because that's what works. And also on the donk drop with this screechy lead. It's a slightly different compression setting for that one, but that's something else you would do, is, you know, as it's on the drop, and that would help to create space. But there's lots of things you can do to sidechain, lots of sounds you can sidechain to your kick to make it pump through. I've also done a kind of similar version to that using on the side drop section. Rather than actually using a sidechain, I've just dropped the volume of the sample here. A lot of people ask me about the rolling kick sounds, and this is a really good way to kind of do it if you don't have kickstart, which is what you can use here. Has the same kind of similar effect. You can drop the volume instead. Gives it that kind of like galloping effect, and it also creates a little bit of space where that's quieter, and it's also, you know, hitting the same time as the kick as well. So kickstart is also a really good alternative to that. So I'll show you on this sound by dropping that in there. I'm going to turn the sidechain off, turn kickstart on. I'll turn that off. It also does the ducking effect. I think Kick 2 is quite rigid. You know, obviously there's a few more settings. You can get a very different groove using the sidechain trigger technique that I've just shown you. So there's a couple of different options for you there. I didn't want to include kickstart in my template because I wasn't sure everyone would have it. I wanted something that everybody could open and use and look at. So the next point I wanted to go through, again, might seem quite obvious, but it's something that I sometimes pick up in people's mixes, and they can sound a little bit muddy with the reverb and the delay. I wanted to talk about EQing the individual reverbs and delays on the send channels like I've done here and here. So all of my lead sounds are routed to quite an aggressive reverb, as you can see there, and then a not so aggressive delay, and both of those have EQ on them. So I'll just play it without first of all. So it makes a huge difference. And yeah, so what I've done with my reverb is I've EQ'd some of the frequencies which just aren't needed, that make it feel a little bit muddy. Like there's no need for any low end on the reverb there, and also there's no need for any high end on the reverb there. It kind of makes it feel a little bit muddy and it gets in the way of the percussion. So I've EQ'd those out, and then just a little dip in the mids there, just to allow the kind of bass to come through. You might prefer it the other way. I mean, it's a kind of preference thing, but personally I think with the EQ'd reverb it sounds generally cleaner in the mix. So, and again with the delay as well, I've done exactly the same. So I've just soloed the delay on its own. There's a little bit more high end on the ping pong when I cut that out. Just felt when it was playing, it was getting in the way a little bit of kind of everything else going on. So I've taken some high end out, and obviously the low end as well off of that. So yeah, that was something else that you can do. I mean, it's much easier to do that on the send channels than it is on the when you're doing it here. You need to add a chain if you're going to do it on your main kind of effects chain. So that's EQing your send, reverb, and delay. The next one, which again might sound pretty obvious, is the order of the effects that you have. So for instance, with the send here, I've got the reverb, and then I'm EQing the reverb. So you know, there's no point in me putting the EQ there. It kind of has a similar effect. However, I don't know if that reverb is adding any kind of low end or high end that I don't want. So the order that you put your effects in is really important. It's the same with this delay, and also with sounds that when you're doing something like distortion, saturation, it's really important, I think, to put an EQ at the end. If you've applied the EQ before and then you add something like the saturator or distortion, you might be adding the more of the low end you've just taken out. So it's always worth putting the EQ at the end of your chain as well, or either or, so that you know that there's no added kind of artifacts being created from that are going to reappear. You know that you're still going to have a kind of clean low end there as well. So yeah, that's it. They were just a few little tips. I'm going to do a much more in-depth tutorial at some point on Mixdown. It's a huge area, so I just wanted to chuck in a few things today that I've got in this project that might help you with future projects, just to get a slightly cleaner Mixdown. Thanks for listening and watching. Tell your friends. See you soon.